Hello and welcome back to the NFL DFS slate breakdown for Monday Night Football Week 2. We're going to be going over the 2-game slate today. I will try and touch on, maybe some sleepers for both games a little bit to help you single game people, but we will be mainly focusing on that 2-game slate. We had a pretty fun weekend, and now we got to finish week 2 strong. Let's do it. Before we get into it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to all our videos. Helps us a ton to just get out free content to you guys. And if you have not already, come join us at Line Star. It is only $39.99 per month. Gets you access to everything we do for all the sports. All the DFS tools, the projections, the optimizers, as well as Props AI. Let's get involved. Let's go. Let's get into the games tonight. All right, so we do have a 4-game slate. We got the Saints versus the Panthers in Carolina and the Browns at the Steelers. One of the things that I thought was very interesting that jumped out to me away is the Saints, the Browns, and the Steelers are all similar paced teams. Carolina does move slightly faster than the other three, so I do think that's interesting. They are also the lowest owned team of the three, even though all three totals are very low. 40 and 39 are all two totals, and both games are close. Carolina's just +3, Pitt is +2. We have an interesting spot in this game, or in this slate, where everybody really is, similarly projected from a team total standpoint. So I think it gives us a lot of room here to kind of make some lineups and try to differentiate it a little bit. Now, looking at ownership, what jumps off at the page to me right away is the Saints are all over the highest owned guys. Now, with Carolina being one of the faster teams, and what does being a faster team mean? Their pace of play is a little quicker. They try to get in more plays, and that just breeds a little more fantasy points. Now, they're not way quicker than everybody else, but they are the quickest team on this slate. And I think at low ownership, that is at least interesting to consider here. Now, I said the same thing for the Sunday show about the Houston and Colts game, how that game was one of the faster games on the slate. It only had a 39.5 game total, but what happened? That game kind of shot out. They were fast, like we thought they were going to, and there was a couple players that became optimal for that game. So it is important to look at pace, and I think this is an interesting spot here. All right, so let's go over the 4 quarterbacks here. We got Deshaun, we got Carr, Pickett, and Young. Young going pretty much young, unowned. I would say he's probably more like 8-10% owned than 0.5%, but he is the obvious low quarterback on the totem pole here when ownership is considered. Now, if everybody is saying the Saints are going to march on Carolina, which that's what it looks like from an ownership standpoint, doesn't it make some sense to maybe have some Carolina players? I mean, you could get real crazy and go with Bryce Young, who does actually have some options. So I think that is interesting at low ownership. He didn't have a great game first time out. He threw a couple picks, and he probably will throw a couple picks again. But if he has to throw a lot, which he threw 38 times last game, if he's up in that 40 throws range again, he could put up some points at a very cheap salary and low ownership. It is kind of interesting. Deshaun Watson, highest owned guy. Now, he's going against the Steelers D, who is tough, and they're much tougher at home. The other thing is Amari Cooper. So I thought he was kind of more doubtful than questionable coming into today, but now it looks like Cooper will probably play, or at least he's pushing to play. And so Cooper will probably be out there. Now, it is a growing thing, so maybe Cooper can't cut quite as well as he normally can. He definitely is not going to be 100%, I can tell you that. And with that, I don't love Deshaun Watson's pass catchers. Without Cooper out there, he's got Eli Mitchell, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's got Njoku. It's a very ragtag bunch there. Now, while I really do like Njoku, I think he is a great talent, and he is one of my favorite tight ends on this slate. I don't love that outlook for Watson, and I think Nick Chubb is a very good play. So I don't love chasing Watson at this high ownership. I think Derek Carr is likely the best one for today. I know Watson does have a slightly higher fantasy projection than Carr does, but I think Carr just is the safest with one of the highest ceilings on this play. So I definitely will be getting to Carr, especially because he's not the highest owned guy, and I think he has the best pass catchers on this slate. He has the best weapons to get the ball to. So I think Derek Carr is extremely interesting, and I like him. Kenny Pickett. Look, Pickett had a rough week 1. He did throw the ball 46 times, though, and he very well could have to throw the ball a lot here once again. Now, he's not going to be losing 30-7 like he did last week, so maybe that, output comes down quite a bit, but Kenny Pickett is without Deontay Johnson. And with that, there is some value options with that Steeler offense that is a little bit interesting. And you can obviously stack those pieces with Kenny Pickett, which all in all at 5,400, 2.5x, look, he doesn't project much differently than the two higher owned guys. Bryce is in the same spot. You only have a 3.5 point difference for point wise for Bryce Young than those other two. The top two guys. So I think it's very interesting with quarterback today. I think you can absolutely get different. Now, if we go to the matchup tool, Derek Carr clearly, has the best matchup. Watson, Bryce Young, and Kenny Pickett being worse. Young, however, not much better than Pickett. He definitely has a tough matchup in this spot. Tannehill threw 3 interceptions last week, and, he's a vet. He shouldn't be doing that versus any team. So it is definitely a little scary there. But hey, you're going against a bunch of different lineups. We got to get a little weird, especially on these small slates. All right. So let's go into the running back here. We'll just go to RB1 for now. Najee Harris has the best matchup, it looks like, then Nick Chubb, Jamal Williams, and Miles Sanders. Now, Chubb is the clear-cut number 1 best running back option on this slate. Don't get me wrong, he is going to be super high owned, but he has the highest floor, highest ceiling of any of these guys. And even at his ownership, I think you likely need to strongly consider playing him. Jamal Williams is the other guy that is likely to get, a majority of the carries, and they are favorites, and let Bijan and Tyler Algier go off last week. Now, Kendre Miller may be back in the lineup, which will definitely, he will cede some carries too, but I think he is interesting and very much in consideration. Najee is interesting. The one thing is, frankly, I just think Jaylen Warren is better. So they are splitting carries or splitting time. I think both are interesting. Warren just has more home run ability, which interests me a little bit more. I think running back spot is one that is very interesting. It's going to be very, very hard to get different at the running back spot today. If we go to ownership, Jamal Williams, Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders, Najee Harris. So the 4 we covered there. Najee and Warren, I think, are both interesting plays. As look, the Steelers are down one of their main weapons. They're going to have to get the ball to some guys that can make plays, and both of them can. So I think they're interesting. Jamal Williams is obviously interesting, and Nick Chubb. Miles Sanders is, of the three high-owned guys, is my least favorite here. The reason being, although he will get a ton of work, he had 18 carries, 6 targets last game. I do expect him to get a bunch of this work once again, but this Saints front is pretty good at limiting rushing yards, and I don't love facing them. Now, he's going to get a ton of work, so he's definitely in consideration, but if you're making one lineup, he might be the guy I leave off of these high-owned guys. I do really like Jaylen Warren, getting a little different. Hubbard as well. Hubbard, saw about 8-10 touches, couple receptions, whatnot. So he is interesting. Now, let's get over the wide receiver side. All right, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed are all great options. They are the highest owned, and they are really the reason why I like Derek Carr as a quarterback. When you get below that, you got Pickens, who is now going to serve as the wide receiver 1 with Deontay Johnson out. One of the things I think is super interesting, and I am surprised nobody is going right there, is Calvin Austin. 3,500 on DraftKings. He got 6 targets last week. This guy, the Steelers like him. He has speed. He can make big plays. And I am shocked that he is going pretty much unowned on such a small slate. I think he is somebody you definitely need to consider. He's going to be out there a lot, and he's very, very interesting on this team. So the Cleveland situation is a little bit up in the air right now. If Amari Cooper plays, his ownership is going to be much higher than this. Now, I simply just don't really like him coming off a groin injury. And we're still not sure if he's really going to play. He's going to go through warm-up, see how it feels. But coming up to today, everybody thought he was definitely out. So to go from being definitely out to probably playing is a big jump. And that injury definitely scares me. Now, with that being said, it's going to scare everybody. So if he's going unowned, we know he's the number 1. And if he's out there, you have to consider him as being healthy. I think he's interesting on purely a game theory DFS play just because nobody is going there. And we don't truly know his health. It could be anything. Allen Robinson's going to be out there a ton. He will be the wide receiver 2. At his price, he's at least interesting. We haven't seen a ton from him the last couple years. However, last year he had a couple games. Last game he got 8 targets, had 5 for 64. He is at least interesting. Now the Carolina situation is one we really got to look in. So, Adam Thielen's questionable. DJ Chark is questionable. Then you got Mingo and Terrence Marshall. Terrence Marshall right now is 3,300, 0.7% owned. Played 90% of the snaps last week. I think he's a little interesting as a dart throw for a team that is the fastest one. And everybody in the field thinks Carolina is going to have to be playing catch up since the New Orleans guys are so high owned. So I think these Carolina receivers are all interesting. As one, there's going to be the most, they very well could have the most plays on this slate, meaning more receptions or, yards, whatnot, or the ability to score more fantasy points. Now, a broken play here or there totally changes the slate, and I think Carolina receivers are absolutely interesting to target. Now, if we look at the matchup tool here, Olave, look, the Saints definitely have the best matchup versus that Panthers D. Panthers D is a little sneaky, though. It is decent. It's not, you're not going to walk over them. Browns are popping up a little bit. Now, the Browns are definitely popping a little bit more because of the data from Pittsburgh without TJ Watt. Remember, he missed a ton of the season last year. That defense is totally different with and without him. He's going to be playing, and they're at home. That Steelers D is tougher. Saints are coming in next. So if Carolina's coming in next. If that's another thing to consider here, because they're not at the very bottom. They're cheap and unowned. All very interesting aspects. And lastly, we got the Steelers guys who got absolutely shut down. Or the Cleveland Browns D absolutely shut down the Bengals last week. Who knows if that D is for real or not, but I am absolutely interested in some Steelers just because of the value they create, especially Calvin Austin, who's going to be on the field a ton and super, super cheap. Now, head over to tight end. One of the things that kind of jumped out onto me when I was reviewing tight ends is Hayden Hurst. 7 targets last week. Once again, he's low owned. He's a Carolina. They have the chance of having the most plays on this slate. So they're very interesting. Juwan Johnson is being used a ton. I think he is very interesting as well. One of the things that is not popping up here is Taysom Hill, who will be an absolute dart throw. He didn't play that much last week, but we know when he has his games, he goes absolutely nuts. So he is very interesting because he is a low-owned, slate-breaking type upside player, which will, be interesting to have a very small amount because there is the chance of. Now, Njoku, I think, is absolutely the best tight end on the slate, especially if Cooper does not play. But even if he does, it might actually work in his favor because Cooper will just take a little bit more of the coverage. And Njoku's a very good tight end, and he has a real solid ceiling. 9 for 89 and a touchdown, 6 for 88, 7 for 71. He can put up some real numbers, and if he gets a touchdown, he's definitely going to be in the optimal, especially versus a Pitt team that can get after the quarterback. And, tight end is a quarterback's, favorite weapon in that situation. They like dumping it off to running backs, to tight ends, and whatnot. So I think he is extremely interesting. Freiermuth obviously is interesting. He does have a tough matchup here, but once again, it's without Deontay Johnson. So the target share is going to grow for the stars. It's going to grow for Freiermuth. It's going to grow for the wide receivers. I think that he is extremely interesting here. Now let's take a look at the ownership for the tight end just so we can go over that as well. And Freiermuth getting all the ownership, which no surprising. Juwan Johnson is second. Now, if you remember from our matchup tool, he was the worst matchup. So, maybe you want to get away from that a little bit. And Njoku, the best matchup, is going only 14% owned. And then Hayden Hurst at 9%. I think tight end is a possible spot where we can definitely get different. So, defensive-wise, look, it's total variance from week to week at defense. I think the Saints are fine. The Saints probably have, on paper, the best upside. They force turnovers, and Bryce Young is a young quarterback, so he is likely to create some. Browns are an interesting spot because Pittsburgh is with Deontay Johnson. It's going to be a little bit harder for that offense to move the ball. So they do make some sense. Panthers do have a little bit of a sneaky D. They're always a little bit better than it appears. And lastly, the Steelers. Look, I think the Steelers are super interesting going at low owned. They have TJ Watt. We know they can put up some defensive numbers when they really commit to it and when they're at home and it's a close game. So I think the Steelers at 15% are fairly interesting here. All in all, I think this is a very, very interesting slate. I like some of the lower owned guys. I very much like Calvin Austin. I think it is insane that he's not going higher owned. He's probably one of my favorite plays on this slate. Terrence Marshall is interesting to me just because he played so much. As Jonathan Mingo, too. You know, the one thing, though, watch the injury reports with Carolina. If Chark and Thielen are both active, you know, those two guys may play a little bit less, but ownership won't get steamed up on them, that's for sure, because it'll be another wide receiver in the mix. All in all, look, my highest owned quarterback is likely going to be Derek Carr, but I'm definitely going to have some Bryce Young and just play the lotto with him. All right, guys, that will do it for us today. It was a quick rundown for the Monday night slate. I hope you guys get some information from it, create some nice lineups. Oh, lastly, one of the things I wanted to say is strategy-wise for this contest, and I actually meant to do this at the beginning of the show, but forgot. All right, so on these 2-game slates, there's a big thing here. We need correlation. Correlation is huge. Now, if we look at, you know, the summary for 2-game slates, multi-team stacked, 100%. Team stacked, 100%. We have to be stacking today, and I think we really need to lean into the 4 teammates on one side of the ball here. So if you see, we got 33% 4-3 stacks, 33% 4-4 stacks. I think we really need to lean into the correlation, into the stacks today, and really just try and go for, you know, say the 2 teams that really separate themselves from the pack. I'm sorry, I just hit my coffee cup. So that's one thing I'm going to say. My lineups are going to be very, very heavy on correlation today. And I would expect or suggest that you guys do the same. Stack the heck out of these teams and, you know, hope you're able to hit the nuts with that. It will be much easier to hit the nuts on the lineup with that correlation. So lean into it tonight for sure. All right, guys, have a good one. Now I'm actually out of here. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the video. Helps us out a ton. Adios.